in the political world and in the civic world to obtain greater Latino turnout in the county. I do want to address the efforts that LA County has made and the city of LA as well, because we've worked closely with both of them in their outreach efforts. We think they have some innovative ideas. They've taken some good approaches in terms of working with the media, enhancing the use of technology and social media. But they need to be able to have the resources to do this in a much more targeted way. They need to be, like I said, Dean had talked about microdata, for example. How do we tailor messengers to different groups and learn more about what will motivate them and what will educate them about voting? We heard the figure $250,000 for an outreach budget for the County of Los Angeles. Well, there were about 4.6 million people who were registered but who did not vote in November 2014. So you take that 250,000, you divide it by about 4.6 million. That means essentially the county had about a nickel, 6 cents, to spend on each of those voters. Simply not enough resources, and we need to think about whether there's a role the state can play in providing that funding or helping with that funding, and whether it's funding for other operations, looking at suspension of mandates. We really need to think a lot more about that whole issue of how do we give registrars the resources they need to do the outreach and to do their job. You've also heard several folks talk about civics education and incorporating, some concept of hands-on voting into our schools. Well, we've heard a lot of really good ideas, and we think there are a lot of good ideas out there, but here's what we think we need. We need to get the Secretary of State and the Superintendent of Public Instruction to talk to each other about all these ideas. Let's create a state clearinghouse where you can see what are the best practices, the most effective ways to do civics education, and to do it in a hands-on way. And let's do some assessment of what works and doesn't, so that we're not just trying things without some kind of follow-up. I finally wanted to mention is that in light of the importance of the Latino community to California's democracy and Los Angeles County's democracy, we've talked a lot about changes to the mechanics and the procedures of voting and what might that do. All I would like to say about those, I'll certainly answer questions about specific changes, but I just want to give some examples of we really need to think through what the impact would be on the Latino community and Latino voters, because there may be an impact that we don't intend or think about. Let's take an automatic registration, and Chair Allen, you actually mentioned this issue. We need to be very careful about if we were to automatically register people based on databases, the quality of information in those databases about the citizenship status. And for the Latino community, this is very salient because there is such a range of citizenship statuses and eligibility statuses within the Latino community. We don't want to inadvertently register somebody who is not eligible and then have that be a problem when they later on do go through the naturalization process. So we need to think that detail through. I'd like to make a similar comment about thinking through primarily vote-by-mail elections. So we have kind of an interesting paradox in terms of vote-by-mail elections and the Latino community. On the one hand, as Registrar Vu correctly noted, when Latinos go and navigate the process of signing up to be a permanent absentee voter, when they actually go through that process, they will have higher turnout rates than Latinos who do not go through that process. But we also know that overall, for the Latino community, all Latinos, both those who are do absentee voting and also those who do poll site voting, Latino use of absentee voting or vote by mail is less than the use of the overall population. So there are lower rates, and we don't really know why. I could speculate, but we really don't know why Latinos are less likely to actually sign up for vote by mail. So here's the question. Let's say we do a primarily all vote by mail election. When that ballot hits the mailbox and that Latino citizen opens up the mailbox and looks at that ballot, we really don't know what's going to happen. We don't know whether that person is going to act like one of the voters that Registrar Vu talked about and say, great, going to fill this ballot out, send it in, easiest thing in the world. Or are they going to say, you know what, I'm not really sure what this is all about. I really don't know. I don't trust the mails. I mean, we just don't know what's going to happen. So we're really glad that the legislation that Assemblymember Gonzalez passed is being done as a pilot, so we can learn and take a look at the experience that San Diego will have. And one of the good things the legislation has is it actually requires some assessment, if you do have a special election that's primarily vote by mail, of what the impact is on different population groups. I just want to end by saying, you know, this seems like an enormous challenge for us in terms of what happened in LA County in election 2014, but it is providing us with an opportunity to do some really good thinking about how can we revitalize our democracy, and the Latino community wants to be part of that process, and we want to work with you to move the process forward. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, let's next hear from Ms. Ahmed.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. It's hard to follow Rosalind. She's such a great leader in the community when it comes to civic engagement. My name's Tanzila Ahmed. I'm with Asian Americans Advancing Justice. I'm the voter engagement manager there. And we've been doing civic engagement work at Asian Americans Advancing Justice. We used to be called Asian Pacific American Legal Center. They're both still mouthfuls. But we've been doing this work, civic engagement work, for about, since 2000, but we've been doing voter engagement work specifically since about 2004 onwards. So we've been doing this work in the Asian American community for some time now. Specifically, my particular work in the organization is to empower, mobilize, and protect the rights of Asian American voters. And our effort in Los Angeles County, we've been doing, it's been increasing over the years. So most recently, this past election cycle, we were able to do a voter engagement effort that was across both LA and Orange County in 17 different languages. So our effort focused on communities that speak Arabic, Bangla, Khmer, Cantonese, Mandarin, Tagalog, Hindi, Japanese, Korean, Malay, Urdu, Punjabi, Samoan, Thai, Tongan, and Vietnamese. It's one of the great things about being in LA is that you can run a campaign like this because our community here is so diverse and there's so many different types of population. I'm also going to give a step back and give a little bit of context about the Asian American community in Los Angeles. So here in LA, we have over 1.5 million Asian Americans in Los Angeles, and we represent 16% of the county's population. Between 2000 and 2010, the population grew by 20%, which is twice as fast as any other racial group in the county. And some of the cities within the county with the largest populations are Los Angeles, Long Beach, Torrance, Alhambra, and Monterey Park. And the ethnic groups that are the largest in LA are the Chinese, Filipino, Korean, Japanese, and Vietnamese communities. And of this population, we know that 500,000 of the Asian Americans in Los Angeles County are limited English proficient speakers, which means that English is not their first language. They need a little bit more help. So this was context to kind of give an idea of who the Asian American community is in LA County. Specifically for the electorate, we don't have specific data on some of this stuff, but we do know that according to the U.S. Census, this nationwide, 59% of Asian American only 59% of Asian Americans eligible to vote are registered to vote. So there's a big non-registered gap going on right there. And according to the 2012 statistics, which is when we last released our ballot box report, we know that there are about 459,000 voters in Los Angeles County that are Asian American.